that they actually think and mean what they mean what they say, or they're
They
saying what
mean
they
what they
mean.
say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes to see the extremes um, is instructive, and to see some of the ways that I guess this age old conversation of how men and women are pitted against one another, especially in our very um, I don't even emotionally charged atmosphere that we find ourselves in today. And so this is one that's a little tamer, but it is on the wage gap. Let's get into this.
Is 17 cents. Women make 83 cents to that of men. That's all men and women. If you look specifically at men and women under the age of 30 who work full-time jobs, it's 93 cents. And in most of the major metro areas where women are complaining the loudest about the wage
Which
gap,
are predominantly
It's high.
liberal.
they outgain
Yes.
men. In New York, women, I believe, make 101%
They're complaining
of what
about
men
working
make.
12-hour shifts. That is
All right. So this is a shorty, but talk to me about your experience with wage gap and mentalities that are related to that. Maybe we talk about the North, South. Maybe we talk about where you're from. I don't know which direction you want to go with this, but go.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I'll say my experience with the wage gap. I don't know if I have experienced a wage gap. I think if anything, like my perspective on this is not necessarily the cents to the dollar, but the promotion ability. So, like, I'll give an example. When I
Okay.
kind of hit my stride in sales, I was in a highly conservative company, and there came a point where I left because I kind of noticed the trend that women are not being promoted into leadership roles. Not saying
Okay.
across the board that was never seen, but it was much, much rare. And then if you really look between the lines, you have to consider that their mindset about that isn't that they just don't love women. It's that they don't believe that women make good leaders over men. So maybe
Really?
we'll kind of dive into that and look and see. Maybe we'll just talk about that. Like, what does it look like for a woman in this day and age in conservative worlds that are Christian oriented at the heart of them? Typically, you're not going to see a woman as I'm not going to say you're never going to see a woman, but it's going to be rare. So what is it about that?
Okay. Well, let's
dive
jump.
into that.
Yeah, let's springboard from the rest of this conversation, because I think that fills in a little bit of the conversation here. But I do want to I want to go there today. So let's hear this.
insane.
But my point is, when we say the wage gap is a myth, first of all, there's a reason the wage gap exists, and there's also a reason why it gets higher the older you get, because women decide to do things like take care of children. You can't take 3-4 years off from work, come back and be like, I can't believe the guy who was making the same amount as me 4 years ago is now making more than me. Like you.
So I think that may be one of the answers to,
Yeah, it's valid.
and obviously I don't, I think I know the corporations you're speaking of, but we shall not say names here. But what I'll simply say is it possible that women, as they get older and begin to have families, begin to be more established in their families, want to spend more time with their family, and that removes them from the workforce, maybe for a number of years, and that emphasis there means that the men are moving ahead, whereas when the women, they come back, they've not had those years of experience, and maybe they're not getting promoted because of that. Is that fake news, or is that real news? Or talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, I'll say this, like, logic is logic without making it emotional. If someone has not sat in the seat at a company for 4 years, the person that did sit in the seat should get a raise. They should be at a higher place because they put in the time, they put in the equity. Having said that, bearing children is a huge blessing. And I think women in this day and age, that's a whole other topic that a lot of great minds out there talk about, is women are avoiding our God-given right to raise children. And so for us, to be like straddling two worlds, trying to make a huge wage and raise a family, the person that's going to eat up the most in that equation is the woman. So I think, just kind of leaning into the blessing of having children. If you're going to go that route, have your kids, like, do that, lean in, and accept that maybe on the job side of things, you're going to come up a little bit short, but you're raising a family.
I'm curious about this. You're not married, and as you said earlier, when you were looking at sort of the landscape in this particular place where you were at, you were saying that as you're looking down the horizon there doesn't seem to be promotional opportunities and things that are going to advance you, at the same level that you were continuing to advance.
Yeah.
How do you read that in reference to being unmarried and the impulse that I've heard on some of the podcasts that we really should have a movement of women who don't want to get married, who don't need to get married, who need to, do the opposite of what it is that you were just talking about. We need to invest ourselves in our career, make as much money as we can, be as self-sufficient as we can. The children are not a blessing. The children are more of an albatross than anything. How do you leverage the two of those things?
Yeah,
Or maybe,
totally.
yeah.
Well, I will say this. There's in my mind, I don't ever fault a company for making those decisions. I'll say I'm a logician at heart. So you made a statement at the beginning of the show. You said a lot of women come at you heavy and they say, hey, you're a little brash. You don't approach things with enough emotional finesse. And then your mindset back is to actually look at women and to challenge that. And so if we really take those subtle thoughts that have been quelched by our society, we think about like what makes a woman president. Why are we afraid to have a woman president? We're afraid that in a moment we have to make a tough call, a woman is going to make a soft call. And so there's a mindset within men that women are not strong leaders, that they can't make tough calls because of our emotion. So rather seeing emotion as a strength that can actually be logical in times, it takes a different mindset of trust that just has to be worked out with enough time and equity.
May I ask a question on my own show?
Yes.
Because I do want to maybe tease this out. This may be solid gold. It may get my show canceled. It may get me in trouble. You may not ever want to come back to the show. But do we not see men and women from the created order in a complementary role? Meaning there is in Genesis 3 this sort of embedded competition that's going to take place between men and women. Mm-hmm. But in the original role, Genesis 1, Genesis 2, flourishing in the garden, the women take on more of a nurturing role by design, and the men are out, in the position of prophet, priest, protector, and in some of those types of leadership roles. Now, I would be willing to say that both of those are equal leadership roles, leading in the context of a family and leading in the context of culture and society. They're two very important forms of leadership, but I think because our culture has charged us to be able to think they're not valued the same way, then I think women, and I can't speak for women, so that's why you're on the show today. Women feel the need to have to enter into that world of leadership to validate and to justify their existence. And I personally don't feel like there's any justification whatsoever that is needed for a woman to say, I'm a nurturer. I don't want to go and fight the wars. If there's wars that need to be fought, that's fine. You go fight the wars. Am I wrong on this? Help me out.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I remember doing a 20-page paper in college over Genesis 3:16. And at first you have to accept there is a curse. What does that look like? What does the word desire look like? What is that? And from my understanding,
the Bible scholars are turning to Genesis 3:16.
It's going. So, there is a formula here where women are rising up to overpower men. There is a premise for feminism, but then we have to also accept that the curse has two sides. Why are women feeling the need to do that? Why are they feeling the need to fight for themselves? And so just to even get back to just a thread, because this is a huge discussion we can go into, just a thread of outcome right now. I'm a single woman working at a company, hypothetically, and I don't have the luxury of just sitting in the back seat and having a provider to step into the gap for me. I have to be the provider in a work context. So for me, I have to look out for a wage. I have to be inevitably a strong leader. I have to embody these traits that a man would be called on in order to make the wage that would take care of me, because I am left without a partner to step out and be a provider. Just one thread of how this is working out in our modern society. If women are not actually being, courted and married and allowed to be a woman, allowed to be in our nurturing wall, we have to actually step out and embody the traits of a man to survive in this world.
Let me go ahead and read Genesis 3:16. To the woman, this is God speaking to the woman. He said, I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor, you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. And so you alluded to that. 20 pages later, we've still not settled the discussion. However, you have spent some time thinking through this, and I just submit this because I have a daughter. As you were able to see, we were talking offset before the show started and my daughter came in, gave a hug. She's getting to that age where conceivably 5 to 10, 20 years from now, she could be married and have a family of her own.
Yeah.
And in thinking through that, the responsibility of protecting and providing and nurturing my daughter will be transferred to someone else. And that is the biblical pattern of what happens in marriage. I'm giving her over to be married. There is a transference from my protectorate and leadership and nurture and care to someone else who then they begin a family. There's a family unit of their own. When you don't have that, would it not be the biblical pattern that you would still be under the protection and provision to some extent of your father?
Yeah, it's a good point.
And that and that it shouldn't necessarily be you who's going out in the world and saying, I got to make this thing happen. I'm just me out here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you hit that. Actually, we have to look and see how Jesus took care of widows. He took care of single women. He really has a heart for women in the Bible.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, and the church involved in that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So if women are kind of left on their own, there's a lot of fear that, on the forefront, you see this intimidating woman who seems to be grappling for power. But on the inside of that woman, I think if she were really honest with herself, there's fear. There's a vulnerability of being the weaker of the two physically. And so as that works itself out, those repercussions come across as very strong and brash and maybe prideful. But at the heart of it is a tender woman who really does want to embody the role of a nurturer.
Okay.